Hello and welcome back to the Double One Radio Gamescast. As always, I'm your host Ryan, and today I am joined by my lovely trio of, well, I'm part of the trio, but my trio of co-hosts, including myself, Brett and Alex.
Hello.
I realized why
I'll
it
be
was
playing the part
gone
of the everyman.
midway through the introduction. I was too deep already. I had to keep going. So,
Part of the system at this point.
I think everyone knows this is Elden Ring week. It's, of course, a week-long celebration of all things Elden Ring and Dark Souls.
Of course.
And Bloodborne. We'll throw that in there, too. Maybe some Sekiro.
National holiday.
National holiday. I hope everyone is ready, because that's all we're going to talk about. Not a whole lot of noteworthy news happened this week anyway. There's going to be some stuff next week, so we're not missing too much by skipping over that this week. However, we like to start the show with a game sometimes. And I got an interesting one for all of you.
It's a game.
So, if I am to look up the Souls-like tag on Steam and sort by the highest user review, what is the first game I'm going to see of things that have over 1,000 reviews?
This is going to be a trick. It's not going to be any one of the mainline Souls games, is it?
I don't think any of the Souls games are actually listed as Souls-like.
They are. They are under the
Yeah,
Souls.
they
are.
Souls-like. They are
Okay.
Souls. Oh.
Highest rated? That is a good question.
Yeah, it's a loaded one.
I don't think the highest rated is going to be an official one, because they had it would have been, had Prepare to Die edition of Dark Souls still been there, I think I would have said that, just because of how long it's been there. It has time to accrue all those high reviews.
But they replaced
positive. Yes, they replaced it with the remastered edition, which people are salty about for no reason. So I don't know, but I think it's not an official Souls game. I just don't know what it is, because there's too many, is what I'm gonna say.
All right, so I'll give you three choices. All three of the things that are in the top three. These are top five. Not the top one or two, but just to give you an idea of what's up here.
Mm-hmm.
God of War.
What?
Dead Cells.
Oh.
5D chess with multiverse time travel.
Oh, God.
And Tree Simulator.
Tree
Simulator.
Tree Simulator is the number 2 spot. It has less than 1,000 reviews, though. So
what is the gameplay?
It's $2
of Tree
$2.
Simulator.
It's Tree Simulator 2022, so I assume there's been more.
I have to check this game out.
Photosynthesis. Chlorophyll.
It is not Dead Cells or God of War, but those are up in that top 5. If we're not including like duplicate games and whatnot.
See, I would have, before you said Tree Simulator, I was about to guess some type of dating sim, but I feel like you wouldn't have two Sims in that top 5 list.
I can tell you right now, nobody's gonna get the top game, because I did not know this game existed. It has over 1,000 reviews.
Oh,
so I assume it's a legit game, but I'll reveal that one. So we're aiming for what is number 2 right now.
Is it a Bloodborne remake?
It's on Steam and it costs money. I'll give you that tip.
Hollow Knight.
Oh, that would
Brett's
have been
got to
the
vote
most
for Hollow Knight. You jumping on the train, or are you picking something else?
Oh, I don't have to pick something different.
I might be wrong. I'm probably wrong.
Oh, you know what? Just because we mentioned it in here, and I want to turn heads, I guess, because I'm a little fire starter, huh? I'm a little controversy boy. The Surge.
The Surge. All right. Well, the
Highest
Surge is
rated,
very
Alex.
far off. It is nowhere near, I think, even the top 10. Brett, you were right on the money. The number 2 rated,
Let's go, baby,
over 1,000 plays is indeed Hollow Knight, plus the soundtrack.
Of course.
When you go to the first rated, however, you'll find a little game called, let me make sure I get this name correct and don't butcher it, Super Chicken Jumper. Sitting at 98% positive reviews, $5. and there's over 1,000 reviews. So it is
I
technically the
think
top Souls-like on Steam.
I think we've been waiting for the wrong game to come out. I think it already came out, and it's Chicken Jumper.
All right. So now that that is out of the way,
So the podcast is over. Okay.
all right. With that out of the way, now the easier one to guess. What is the top-rated Souls-like from Software on Steam?
Sekiro,
Dark Souls 3.
if we're counting it, because it's the most not Souls.
I will tell you,
Souls game.
Sekiro does appear under the Souls-like tab on Steam.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna stick with Sekiro.
Sekiro. Alex, you sticking with Sekiro too, or breaking off?
No, I'm saying Dark Souls 3.
You are both correct. They are tied at 94%.
Wow,
The
isn't
only
that
thing
beautiful?
pushing it to Dark Souls 3, Dark Souls 3's Season Pass, or Dark Souls 2's
Oh.
Season Pass actually, is at 96%.
That is weird.
That's
That is
very
really weird.
strange. I don't know. I can't explain that. But both Sekiro and Dark Souls 3 are sitting at 94% positive reviews on Steam. So with that out of the way, let's get directly into our big discussion topic of the day, Souls-likes and all things about them. First of all,
Yes.
we need to hype check Elden Ring. Where are we sitting at? For reference, this is the podcast coming out 5 days before Elden Ring releases. 3 days if you're listening, the pre-recorded version, 5 days if you're live. So, how are we feeling?
You know when it's like a couple days before Christmas and you're a kid and it's like, oh, why can't it be like tomorrow? Like I can't wait. Like I think about it, and then I get like that same like excitement inside. Nothing has awoken my cold dead heart like that in many years.
It's finally
true.
started beating again.
It's finally coming. Oh, Elden
Ugh.
Ring.
God.
Yeah, I think I'm in a pretty equivalent place because there are like, I can count on one hand the amount of games that I have like actively decided to wake up early in the morning to play. I'm not a midnight person. I never stay up till midnight, but I will wake up at 6 a.m. to play a game that has just come out in rare cases. The last one I did it for was Kingdom Hearts 3.
Oh my goodness. That's pretty base.
Pretty good. Pretty good, right? Oh, what a disappointment.
Wow. Oh.
Before that, it was Dark Souls 2. Because Dark Souls 2 released on Steam at like 7 o'clock at night. So I was sitting there waiting for it to come out. And I was so excited to play Dark Souls 2. So Dark Souls 2 was the last one. 3, for some reason, something happened and I wasn't waiting for it to come out. But 2 was big hype. And thankfully, I ended up liking 2 a lot. Despite, I think, what a lot of people thought
What are the
about
good
it.
ones?
When did 3 come out? 2014?
3's more recent.
13, I think.
I think. Let me...
Or the
Depends.
13 might be Scholar of the First Sin for Dark Souls 2. I could be wrong.
Dark Souls 3 is more recent than that, for sure. I think it was 2016, yeah.
Ah.
Oh,
So,
okay.
Bloodborne was, I believe, 2015, 2014, in that range.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we got some good choice for Dark Souls games. I'm very excited for Elden Ring, mostly because I'm a big fan of magic in Souls games, even though I never play it first. It's never my first playthrough. I think in Elden Ring that might change, because, man, I want to shoot space butterflies out of portals at people. So cool.
I wish I was as hyped as you guys, because I see it and it looks fantastic. And we'll get into this later in the podcast, I'm sure, for why I'm not. But it looks so exciting, and I can't, and I still don't know whether or not I'm gonna buy it yet. I can't bring myself to be overly hyped.
Well, yeah, because we have two diehard FromSoft boys in this chat, and then Alex, you're not a diehard FromSoft boy, so it makes sense.
No.
There's no reason to feel bad about it.
All right. So that we've covered our hype level for Elden Ring. I want to do a bit of background on the Soul series. and our involvement in the Souls series, specifically Brett and I, since we play, I think have played all of them. I don't know in your case, Brett.
Yes,
Um,
at least once. Yeah.
so I've played every Souls game at least once, and Bloodborne. I haven't finished all of them. Never finished Dark Souls 1, because 1 did not come out. 1 came out when I didn't have a computer that could play it. And I just didn't pick it up on any consoles, so I just never played it until more recently when the Switch version came out, and I just haven't had the time to finish it. But yeah, that's the only one I believe I haven't completed. I haven't done the DLC for Bloodborne either. It's on my list to go back to.
It's a good DLC. Yeah.
Still holding out for that 60 frame rate patch. Hoping it
Dude.
comes. It's never gonna happen at this point, but I want it so badly.
That's
I
going to
went
be the
back-
real national holiday.
I was playing
Look
Bloodborne
at me
all
from
day
Soft.
today in hype for Elden Ring. I was like, oh, I got to go back and play. I'm gonna start pushing to finish Demon Souls. Alex is really having a rough time.
Look at me from Soft. Bloodborne for PC when?
Never.
That's a Sony
Bloodborne
question.
for PC when?
That's a Sony question, not a FromSoft question, as far as I'm aware.
It is, yeah.
I
unfortunately.
think Sony has the rights to Bloodborne, if I recall the information about that deal correctly. But yeah, I spent the rest of today up until this podcast playing. I wouldn't play like a couple hours of Demon Souls and then swapped over to Bloodborne for the rest of the day to get back in the Souls mood. And for some reason, Bloodborne was always a game, to me it was always the most difficult of the Souls games. I think because I'd played everything else before then and gotten to the mindset of, all right, I gotta like block with my shield or parry and hide behind things and like circle strafe around and do all the Dark Souls tactics. If you play Bloodborne that way, you're gonna have a rough time.
You're screwed, yeah.
And
You don't have a shield in Bloodborne.
after having played
You get
Sekiro and just going back to Bloodborne, I went through like all the bosses that repeatedly killed me before instantly killed them. First try. Got through Father Gascoigne in like a minute, and I was like, what has happened?
Nice.
I've played this game like 5 years, and all of a sudden I'm just blazing through it. So, yeah, it's been an interesting experience going back to that.
That's pretty good.
How's your Souls? Any Souls games you've recently revisited, Brett, to remember the glory days?
Well, I'm one of those. I mean, you know, some call us people that like Dark Souls 2, because that was my first one. Scholar of the First Sin was my first Dark Souls game because I went through the longest time without even hearing about them, and I know sometime in like the middle of high school where I really was like, all right, I want to look into like games things as like a career. What are some of like the great storytelling games that are out that I can play and kind of absorb that stuff so that I make sure that I'm not missing anything. And I think Scholar of the First Sin was just on sale on Xbox Live, and I got it for like $20 or something. But yeah, I've beaten all 3 of the Souls games. I've played Bloodborne for like 20 minutes because I don't own it yet, even though I have a PS4 now. And I suck at Sekiro so bad because the same thing happened to me pretty much, where you get so used to that evolved formula from the 3 Dark Souls games. Even like they play, they control, or I should say, pretty differently from each other. Like Dark Souls 1 definitely has a certain kind of clunk to it that 3 does not have, and 2 has a whole different kind of jank that is not present in any other game.
Yeah, Hulk 2 is a different bag of worms. I'm sure we'll talk about it a bit more, but
yeah,
very interesting game.
Yeah, but it's just that the differing formula between the actual Souls games and Bloodborne and Sekiro is just like leagues apart in terms of like just how you're supposed to play. Yeah, just like pushing that sort of aggression in Sekiro and Bloodborne with like the health regenning to a point on hitting someone in Bloodborne, and the staggering and parry mechanics in Sekiro. Yeah, I suck at Sekiro. That's the only one I haven't beaten besides Bloodborne, which I don't count because I only played.
Yeah, I will add that in. I don't think I've finished Sekiro because my computer broke right after I got past a boss that was very difficult, and I just never reinstalled it. But I need to go back to it because For some reason, for Sekiro, I had the opposite problem of Bloodborne, where I was able to get into the Sekiro mindset very easily and like loop myself around. Okay, this is how the combat works in this game. But there's one boss like relatively early in the game. It's like a big monkey boss, which is not a Sekiro boss. It's a Dark Souls boss, and you have to treat it like a Dark Souls boss and circle strafe and do all of that. And that boss broke me.
Yeah.
That boss
Yeah.
infuriated me to no end, especially when after I finally beat it, I looked online, there were like tons of people that had zero issues with it. I was like, man,
That's how it goes.
this was my like horrible boss. That's the worst boss I think I've ever fought in a Souls game. Not like worst boss design, but just worst time I have had fighting a boss.
Yeah.
To a significant degree, especially because when you kill it, it comes back a second time and gets real angry. It's not. It is fun, but it's not the kind of boss that I had a good time with.
But monkey sword head man monkey head.
Yes.
Yes.
Monkey sword man, monkey head. It is. Is it
Good
that is
description.
super weird because I mean the good thing we'll talk about this as we get more into the topic of the video, but like it's very difficult to just play a Souls game once and then never come back to it ever. Like even if you don't finish it, I rarely finish a FromSoft game on my first attempt because usually I just go like, oh, I had this weapon, but I'm like 60% of the way through the game. I'm just gonna start over and start leveling towards that so I can just use it, and that happens to be like 10 times over because it's just so much fun.
Yeah.
But every time you replay, at least for me, it's like bosses that will be super super difficult. I'll just kill them on like my first or second try, and then like super easy bosses that it's like famous for like Gwen and Dark Souls 1, famous for being like, story wise is more of a pushover than most of the bosses in the game. Uh, but of course, when I'm playing while my mom is watching, because she was sitting through with me through the entirety of this playthrough, I had to him like 15 times, and I was like, why? I shouldn't be doing this. It's Gwyn. But
Yeah.
it's just I don't know. It's just something that happens. I don't know.
It's how you play the game
I
changes.
I feel
Yeah.
like if I was to ever replay or restart Dark Souls 1, the two bosses that I have beaten my first time, Ceaseless Discharge, and
Yep.
I think
With the
so,
cheese.
right? No, not with the cheese.
Oh. Okay.
That
That's
that was
harsh.
that was that was maybe the one like heart pounding, exhilarating boss that I felt accomplished for defeating in Dark Souls 1.
Hmm.
The other one was Quelaag that just felt like a complete pushover. If
She
I was
can.
to
Yeah.
if I was to ever restart that, I think I will be stuck on either of those two permanently.
Yep.
It's
That's what
possible.
happens.
Yeah, it's interesting how different bosses can almost feel like different games. Same thing's been happening with Sifu recently, where some of the bosses are just you'll fight one, pushover. Fight the second one, can't beat them for 3 hours. Ridiculous. Great boss design, but it's a very similar problem to the Souls games. All right, so let's move into our main topic and go through some of our. We have a list of questions here that I asked, specifically Brett, basically. Because I think Brett's the only one in the group that's actually played most of the Dark Souls games aside from me. So we're gonna go through
And
these.
ask questions.
First question. Let's lay out the ground rules for what a Souls-like is and how we're going to be talking about these games and what we're constituting as a Souls-like. Because I think as much as we just did a whole bit where Hollow Knight is the top-rated Souls-like, I don't think we're going to be talking about Hollow Knight as a Souls-like.
A little bit, but not. Yeah. If anything, we're going to be talking about how it's not a Souls-like.
Yeah. So my big thought with this is I think a lot of games that bill themselves as Souls-like, specifically indie games, have a big habit of doing this. I think it's because they're going for like the atmospheric feeling of a Souls-like and not necessarily the actual gameplay mechanics. But a lot of games that are more structurally similar to Metroidvanias will bill themselves as Souls-likes for reasons that I can't quite comprehend. Because I think when you use a Souls-like, the Souls-like tag in your name, right, or the Souls-like pitch as your pitch to audience members or consumers, you run into the problem of you're gonna have a few people that really like it, but you're gonna have a lot of people that really don't want to play that game as soon as you attach Souls-like to the name because they probably haven't enjoyed the Souls games. Whereas I think if you use the Metroidvania term, you're gonna have a wider audience. So I'm interested into why all of this ends up happening and what elements are we gonna need to take to build what is actually a Souls-like in our 001 radio lexicon that defines Souls-like.
The be all
What
end all of
terminology are we
Souls-like
deciding to use?
knowledge.
Any thoughts?
Well, it can't just be atmosphere or just be, the feeling of combat. It can't just be one thing, right?
It's
Absolutely.
you'll find that this question of defining what is a Souls like is when the college professor asks the class at the beginning, "What is art?" and your whole entire semester is spent on that, and you don't get an answer.
And then
Uh,
you find out years later, or maybe just at the end of the class, because the professor tells you the answer is subjective.
yes,
I think
it's
the
less.
actual answer is, does the vibe match Souls? That's
It's more
almost
of the
more the
vibe.
question. Is the vibe check
Um,
here exuding Dark Souls?
because I think a lot of times, especially with Steam, because like the tags are community, like obviously you have things like the chicken jumper or whatever, like they're community given to a point, so that people just do it as a joke and then other people jump on it. But I think it still deserves for indie games like Hollow Knight that are not Souls likes at all. It still kind of deserves to be there because I mean Hollow Knight has like things called souls in it that function kind of similarly in terms of like you die and then have to go get them or whatever. Um, but it's more so, at least in the good ones, that don't like, oh, we're going to be the new Souls, like there's a Dark Souls killer. It's like they wear their inspirations on their wrist. You can see them. Everyone can see them. You know, it's probably inspired by Bloodborne, Dark Souls in some sort of regard. And if you use your inspirations very well, then people will probably like it. But I think I broke down some. There's like a list of things, kind of stealing from of course the guy who does the like 9 more Souls like games you've never heard
Yeah.
Oh,
of
Iron
before on
Pineapple.
YouTube or whatever.
I
Yes, yeah,
I
Iron Pineapple. Um, it's funny because he does it as a joke, but it's often true that things that have like action RPG elements, a dodge or roll button, a parry, hard, and the like grab it before you die again, and then you lose all the levels, level mechanic, and literally like a stamina bar. It's like these things are all like joke, like, oh, it's got to be a Souls, it's got the stamina bar, but to a degree, they're there for a reason. They're trying to be something. Um, it's just some strange concoction of all of those things in the Souls vibe atmosphere that Ryan mentioned
The
is
Souls vibe
usually what
check.
gets them. Yeah, the Souls vibe check gets you that Souls like tag in a serious fashion and not a joke fashion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a very interesting discussion because there's so many games that, like, even Sekiro, I think is a thing when you look at it, maybe matches less of these terms than a lot of other
Yeah,
games like The Surge, like Lords of the Fallen, um, and yet still is pretty comparatively a Souls-like. And I wonder if really what it comes down to is just having the intense boss fights.
I think
Sometimes
it's
I feel like
it's
that's a
it's
major part of it.
it's that,
hmm
but from the very minuscule bit that I have played and more seen, because I've watched most of, like, walkthroughs of most of the Souls games, but I've only played the actual Dark Souls 1 remastered on the Switch. Um, I think, and this could be a thing that separates, Souls from Souls. Like, it it's the AAA quality of having that polished combat feel. Like having the
Yeah,
very le- um r- waiting, um
hefty
uh
feeling combat.
yeah, yeah, it's reactive, and things are just, it feels. You know, that's
It's got the juice.
It does. It does have
I
the
don't
juice.
know how to describe it.
It's the juice. That is the
There's-
actual game design term for it.
Yes.
We say
Sword
that like a
recoil.
joke, but that's the real term.
It's the goo exclamation point.
Yeah, when
Ah.
you hit something in Bloodborne and it makes a squish noise and all the blood comes flying out, that is juice.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think this moves us as a good segue into the difficulty discussion that I want to have here, because you did mention balancing and the feel of combat, Alex. And I think this is another major part of Souls-likes that really is where a lot of like 2-bit imitations of Souls, like the original Surge had a lot of problems with this. Lords of the Fallen failed because of this, which is having that balance, that laser balance in combat, to where when you're going through an area, you can, regardless of your build, mostly succeed. And even if you can't, there is usually some way to recover or get around the situation. There's something you can always do, right? I think it's very important to how Souls-like games feel. Because like when I'm playing Bloodborne, my big difference when I went through it today was I was like, oh, I've never played a strength build in Bloodborne. I've never gone like go get the Kirk hammer, run around with the big weapon and hit some things real hard. Never done that before. So I roll in with that today. And you do have to play
Like
a little
moon
bit differently.
presence.
You have to play a little bit differently because Bloodborne's health recovery works basically on how many times you can hit the enemy quickly. So when you're using the hammer, you have to be careful to not... If you take a hit, it's better to swap into your sword mode and then do a couple of hits and then swap back to hammer, because if you just swap to hammer, you're not going to attack quick enough in most cases to where you're going to get all that health back. But
So it's the number
fun to
of
play.
hits in a time. It's not like the amount of damage you do.
I think it's a bit of both.
Yeah, it's some combo of both.
But it isn't to the point where, like, in the hammer form of the Kirk hammer, you do like 3 times the damage of your sword form, but you attack about a third as fast. You definitely don't get the same amount as 3 hits of the sword will get you when you hit an enemy once with that. So it's usually better to just... But because you have an attack that just swaps modes, it's easiest to just swap into the other mode as part of your attack, and you'll get that health back. So they have ways to account for it, but it does mean I have to play a little bit differently, and if I get damaged, I then have a different game plan than if I were playing on a weapon that is faster. So it's a very unique aspect of Souls, where there's so many builds you can play and so many things you can do in every game. It's almost got a bit of that like action RPG theory crafting to it.
Yeah, they're very mechanically deep. And I think even just like beyond like just combat or whatever, for like the thing that separates official from things versus other like indie Souls like titles is that like mechanical depth just like is the whole entire game, and that adds to just like how many weird things you need to like keep track of. Just like, is my stamina regen fast enough? How like should I put this one singular point into endurance so that I can swing my sword one more time before having to wait for the recharge or whatever, or get one more roll in or something like that?
Do I spread my
And then
points
all
out,
like these
hit all the break
things,
points?
yeah. At the, all the like weird like online stuff with the like the vagrants spawning like enemies that you might see never, even if you play the game 100 times online, that could just spawn and eviscerate you because someone's bloodstain got like traveled between like 20 different worlds or however it works. And then there's like piercing and slashing and blunt damage and bleed and poison, all these like other like crazy things that you can choose to get really knowledgeable about, or you could just be like, I guess my sword isn't big enough.
What is really
I gotta
interesting
go get a
is to
bigger one.
kind of
Well,
track
with
the change of
that,
that.
I also
Yeah.
feel like there's something in Souls that I haven't grasped yet, and this might be one of the things that has driven me away from it. There's a type of build crafting in it that's at a certain degree necessary. People absolutely can, do just naked runs through
I think
Dark Souls and
it heavily
beat it,
depends on the game. So I also played Demon Souls today, and Demon Souls is very much like that, where it feels like when you're playing Demon Souls, you need to have a game plan in mind for most areas in the game, or you're gonna have a lot of difficulty. Because, for example, I'm playing a character I spec'd into like a mix of strength and dex, but I really wanted to go for like eventually move full strength to get like a big axe or something, right? Big, good old meaty chopper. I found my big meaty chopper, rocking it through a few areas. Get to one of the other worlds that's like the Digger King's world. All the enemies are incredibly resistant to every type of damage but piercing. So I then have to completely put away my sweet axe that I've leveled up, take out this dinky little rapier, and use that the entire time. And it's just very... It's not that it makes me feel particularly bad, but it's just like the lack of being able to play the game differently in that section. Because in every game you're going to go through that section in, you basically need to have either a spear or the rapier, because the enemies there are super weak to piercing, but if you hit them with anything but piercing, they're incredibly strong. So you really have to play that area a specific way, which makes it not very satisfying.
Oh, there's another thing with, I guess, sort of how, sort of going with difficulty, but telegraphing things like that. How were you able to tell that they were weak from piercing? Did
Only
something
because
in
I was
the
playing online and there was a message right in front of that area that says try piercing. So it's another interesting thing with the online mechanics where if you're going through that area and you have no clue and you're playing offline, you're probably going to have a bad time compared to playing that online, because online there are like notes everywhere that say use piercing. So
which,
to use it, but offline there aren't.
And I feel like I want to say that that's lazy design, having to rely on other people's trial. It's interesting, but it's also lazy having to rely
It's
on
really
other
interesting.
people's
They never went back to that.
trial and
So
error.
Demon Souls is really the only game where there's that degree of strength against other weapon types.
Okay.
Yeah.
So because Bluepoint didn't do a ton of like level design changes to the remaster, they just basically did graphics overhauls and a few gameplay updates. It means that area is still functionally a like 2009, 2010 level design area, and it's the first proper Souls game, Demon Souls. So it is like it's weird to play Demon Souls on the PS5 now, because it simultaneously feels like a super new Souls game, because the animations are amazing, they're all remastered, and then you'll reach an area that is just like, there's a reason they haven't done this again since this point. Because there's another area in Demon Souls with these like Cthulhu monster prison jailers. For the most part, they're pushovers. They're not super hard to deal with, but they can do like one attack combo that will just kill you if you get hit by one attack. Because they have like a paralyzing thing, and then they'll walk over to you, chomp your head, and then
it's
depending
super
on
slow,
how close they are to you, they'll then do like an AoE thing, and sometimes you just can't get out of it in time, and you just light on fire and die.
Oh god.
And it's intense. For an enemy that is ostensibly like the regular enemy in that area, most of the time it's fine, and then one time you'll like mistime your roll, the camera gets stuck on a pillar or something, you get hit while you're not looking, and then all of a sudden you're dead. It's very strange to see.
The one other thing that I have for this, because this is like the one bit that I have notes on / experience from, is that one of the things that I've noticed in my like Soulsborne playing is that they also, I mean, like, but besides the hidden and like what I said was poor design to the point where you need other people's community help to figure out what's the viable damaging option. They, I don't think at any point, at least that I can remember, stoop down to artificial difficulty increases. Like, just, okay, this has a super ridiculous amount of health, or they just pile a billion rats on top of you, or a billion of this enemy or that enemy. All the bosses that I have fought feel like they have a reasonable amount of health for what they are.
There is
And
an
if it
actual room that does pile about 1,000 rats on you.
does,
But
I was going to mention
it's
this.
very easy to deal with. So
Is it in?
Yes.
Is it in 1?
it's in
I'm
3,
thinking
I
of the
think.
boss in 2.
There's a couple actually.
Uh,
There's the
there's-
boss in 2. There's the rat
There's
pit
that one
in
like
3.
sewer room in 3. Yeah.
The Bloodborne has a sewer
Um,
pit that I was just in.
But it's if you feel like a boss has like way too much health, it's likely a sign that you are doing something wrong. And it's the same thing. I mean, I hate to connect two completely unconnected difficult Japanese RPGs together, but it's that same SMT logic where it's just like, if you are having a really hard time, yes, it's hard, but you can be doing something that can make it much easier for yourself. You need to use
With
the
the
debuffs.
exception
You need
of
to use
the demon princes in Dark Souls 3, if you're a pyromancer. The
Yes,
single worst fight in the
yes.
game.
which is still it's technically I'm still going to file it under you're doing something wrong because you're hitting the fire thing with fire. You can
Well,
not hit it
so
with
there
fire, but
is
at
a
that point you're so late
solution.
into the game.
The main reason, so that boss is like not immune to fire but very resistant to it. You can get
Yes, very
damaging pyromancy that does like dark damage. But if you buy it, the NPC starts to die.
Yes.
No.
So you have a
Oh.
timer. And I think the like actual one that is strong enough to beat the boss with, you don't get until after you beat the boss in the same DLC.
Probably.
So it's that's the one bit of design that I have always thought has been weird to stick around in Dark Souls 3.
This is the exact thing you would expect from the people who said the natural course of things is for Solaire to die in your playthrough.
Yeah. Well,
I don't accept that.
I think the main thing with difficulty in Souls is that having especially played Sifu now, I think there is a difference between the design of Sifu's difficulty and Dark Souls' difficulty. Where Dark Souls is difficult because you have to figure out what you need to do to beat an enemy. And if you're doing that well enough on your first playthrough, you can reliably get through the game with very few issues, aside from bosses, where like most bosses will have mechanics you need to learn a few times and see a couple times.
Yeah.
Playing Sifu, it's the opposite. It is, you know exactly what you need to do the entire time, because it's a very detailed tutorial at the start that tells you exactly how to beat all the things. You just can't do it fast enough. Your fingers cannot hit the buttons in the correct time until you practice it. So I think that is the major difficulty question mark with Dark Souls, of like, a lot of people will say the game's very difficult, and I think it's not because they actually are super hard, but more because they tried to brute force the game in a way that isn't good for them or the game. It's going to make the game feel objectively worse in every way.
Yeah.
Which is part of why I think Sekiro went to a single weapon. Because you can't play Sekiro wrong. So
yeah, and if you do, you will be more punished than any of the Souls games because it's your only option. And that's why it's inevitable. You know, it's we're doing the difficulty discussion. We got to bring up the classic games journalist question of, does Dark Souls need a difficulty slider? And I would hope that the answer here is no, because it wouldn't change. What would you change? It's not gonna.
The only thing I think
as
Dark
an
Souls
experience,
could use is like accessibility option.
Accessibility, yeah.
Because I do think there's like a
maybe
key
some better
detail.
lighting.
Well, I think like the main thing is
Please.
lighting in some areas, but mobility for people with like hand issues where you can't really. Some people can't use their thumb to also press like the healing button while attacking. Right? They may have limited mobility in that regard.
Or like slowed reaction timing to the point where they can't do something like a perfect parry. It's medically impossible.
So I really think I don't think you need to change the numbers around or anything, but like something like an assisted time slow, where you can just like stop the game and like use your ability or your healing item, or maneuver yourself, or look at what the enemy's doing fast enough to recognize what's happening. I think that would be a really good way for a lot of people to play the games better. And more easily without needing to resort to not playing them. Because I do think that's an important thing to note here. We are saying that like the Souls games have intentional difficulty, and they're not going to be for everyone, right?
Yes.
And it's important that
it's me.
Yeah.
It's not for me.
I think it's important to recognize that that's not a bad thing.
No.
In the way of like, if this game was catering to everybody, we would just have Assassin's Creed Valhalla again.
Please no.
Thank God we don't.
Please no. Dear God.
Which a lot of people like Valhalla, but if you like Dark Souls, you probably don't like Assassin's Creed Valhalla that much.
Yeah.
So I think it's an interesting comparison to have. All right.
I think if I could just say one last thing, because I'm doing a callback. This is like, I don't know, like a big brain moment or something. But because we mentioned before, like, why is it that so many indie games or whatever like do the Souls thing or something like that? I said all that and I forgot what I was gonna say. Never mind. I'm not even joking. I actually just
I saw the train just stop mid sentence.
Yeah, it just explode. I'll remember it like 3 hours after we stop streaming.
All right, great.
And then I'll like this in the chat.
Okay, so going pretty hand in hand with this, the next question I had on here is, why do Souls-likes often fail to meet expectations? Specifically calling out games like The Surge, Lords of the Fallen, and Ashen. When what I mean here, I know a lot of people like all of these games, probably aside from Lords of the Fallen. And I don't want to say that these games are failing to meet critical expectations or like player expectations for them, but why do they fail to live up to their genre's sake, right? When they build themselves as Souls-likes, what is causing these games to not quite live up? And I went back and played Ashen recently, and I really appreciate Ashen, and I think at some point I will finish it. But I have the constant sticking point with it where something just doesn't feel right about the combat. And it's not necessarily that the combat's bad. In fact, I think Ashen's combat is very passable to above average for a indie Souls-like. But compared to Dark Souls, above average is not good enough, right?
Yeah.
Because FromSoft are masters of melee combat design when it comes to that weighty, hefty combat that has real impact. I really think that's where budget can bite you in the butt really bad, because you need to have enemies that react. It just multiplies the amount of work that has to go into everything.
It's the amount of resources that are available to a AAA studio, and I think it's also the experience that comes with, starting from Demon Souls and having what, 7 or 8, 6, 7, 8
like
games
6
that
at this
are
point total that are similar enough.
That are like 6 games under your belt, just further refine and perfect that
more if we include
style.
Kingsfield, yeah. So
yeah,
I think it's interesting. And playing Demon Souls again, you can see that bit of lack of polish in Demon Souls, even in the PS5 version, because there are just a few encounters where like these don't quite feel designed for the control scheme that we have, and for the especially Demon Souls often leans toward the easy end and not the difficult end of where there'll be a boss that's a big roiling mass of spears. It looks really cool, and then you kind of walk up to it and it just sort of dies.
Oh,
you don't really have to dodge anything.
Or Phalanx.
Phalanx is such a cool concept, but just kind of dies. It's the best way I can describe it. So yeah, I think it's interesting seeing the progression that they've had from them.
Yeah,
that's how I felt with the one sort of 3D Souls-like that I've played, which is Chronos. Either
Before the Ashes,
I know what you're talking about.
Before Chronos, Before the Ashes. It's just
the Remnant.
It's
prequel thing.
It tries to do the Dark Souls combat with the dodge roll and things like that, or not dodge roll, but like sidestep and dodge in place things. And one, it doesn't have the movement down. It feels just plain different. It feels chunkier and slower. Not in the same way that you would be like in heavy armor and fat rolling, but it's sort of in that way. And then all the enemies, no matter what they look like, sort of feel the same as far as tactics to beat them. Hit them.
Just hit them.
Yeah.
I like that you brought up the comparison too, because I do think there's an interesting thing with Bloodborne there, and that going back and playing Bloodborne, you don't really have to deal with an equip load. You don't really have that whole
you really don't.
decision at any point of, okay, can I carry this amount of items? And to me, that really, I think, freed up how you build your character, Because I think a lot of the time, if you're a new player to Souls, you're not going to want to invest points into the stat that just makes you like able to wear bigger armor. Because a lot of the time, that bigger armor isn't necessarily just better. So it's a little.
I think that's another big problem that I had with the Souls games is they never explain in the game what each stat does clearly, and they change it from game to game.
They do. There's in every menu in Souls games, I think since like Dark Souls 2, you can press in the right thumbstick and it has a little highlight that tells you what everything does.
And it's in Dark Souls 1
Sense.
also.
Oh god.
You do have to look for it. I am gonna say they never tell you that button is there. It is there in all of them. The one exception is poise, because poise is a nightmare stat that we're never gonna be able to dissect the inner workings of.
Yes. And I will say Souls, also,
poise is what determines if you're gonna get staggered when you get hit, essentially, and nobody knows what makes it work. The formula for it is a nightmare.
It's different for every game. Magic. It's both. But I will say also the first time that I pressed the equivalent pause button and just saw the like grid of stats pop. It's like a whole D&D sheet
very intimidating.
Of stats. It's super overwhelming the first time, but like at this point it's just like second nature to me now. Which
I think where it gets more confusing is when like vitality and endurance have swapped their meaning a few times.
Yeah, there's different words in there sometimes.
I don't think the problem for me was that it was I guess it was daunting. But it's the second I saw that and not knowing I had the explanation for what each stat was, I knew I was going to build a character wrong the first time, or like not have it decent, where I'm stuck in the game currently, and I wouldn't be able to get over how disappointing that was.
That is a part of the.
Go for it, Brett.
That is a part of the difficulty for a lot of hard games that have like just that sort of mechanic, and a lot of just kind of similar mechanics along those lines that make them hard. Is like if you're not willing to be like, oh man, I screwed up, I'll just try again. It's a game. If you're not willing to do that, that's part of why people do not like the Souls games, the SMT games, like any like famously difficult game. Pretty much is like if you're not willing
Souls
to try again,
do eventually let you respec somehow. But sometimes it's so far into the game to where it's useless if people have messed up their builds, right?
Yeah. And a lot of times there's a limited amount of respecs you can do. So if you respec into something else wrong, that can happen again.
Yeah. And I think that's also a definite issue. I was going to bring up Path of Exile is a really, really good ARPG that if you look at that character skill screen for the first time and think, oh, I can just go like come up with some skills on my own and like design my character build, good luck. Because you're never going to reach the end game. It's the kind of game where they balance so meticulously around the top players that if you don't follow a top build, you're basically never going to be able to compete with the like clear speed of those builds. So I think it's a problem that's very hard to solve. It's difficult to say. I think in most cases you don't want to balance around those top tier players, because that's kind of the route that Dark Souls takes. Of they're not going to make bosses so fast that you can't cheese them sometimes, right? Because there's always going to be a way to like use magic to cheese them or something, because some people will find that really fun. And I think first and foremost, FromSoft is concerned with are people having fun with the build that they've chosen. So
exactly, yeah.
But I do think it does make it difficult to play anything but like a mixed strength and dex build on your first time playing a Dark Souls game, because if you touch magic at all, you're gonna implode from the sheer insanity of how you can accidentally like never get the NPC who sells you the spells. There's a whole bunch of like qualifiers to magic in Souls games that it's gonna make it interesting when I start Elden Ring with a magic build. Hope they fix some of it. Yeah, I think it's just an interesting discussion to have. But back to the point of this. Games failing to meet expectations. We talked about combat. I think another big thing is a failure to understand the atmosphere of these games and the reason why it is so obtuse. Because I think the benefit of the obtuse atmosphere is kind of dipping into our next topic as well. is that you don't need to listen to any of it if you don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
You can just play the game if you just want to play the game. But there's also a huge layer of detailed information available to you on a lower level. And I think especially Lords of the Fallen just kind of fell flat with that, where the world was just so generic comparatively. There was nothing really going on. I think that's also a huge part of it, because sometimes when you beat a boss and get to like build a cool weapon out of their soul, that is incredibly cool.
Yes, and
sorry.
it gives you more, like, not only is it just cool from a gameplay standpoint, but if you are that person that likes to like go into that detailed but hidden story, you get a whole new description of a thing that has to do with that boss as a character now with the weapon you just made. And was it their weapon that they used in like a past like conflict or something, like that sort of stuff? And I think it's important to say detailed, because even though it's super obtuse, there's like few stories in most like non-ARG media that go like as deep and are up to as much interpretation as like a mainline Souls title story. It's super crazy, and just like I think another thing that brings along those mainline game, or like strings them together, I should say, is that they have a lot of similar philosophies and things that those stories contain, like things about immortality or reincarnation or making the world or something else last for longer, last forever. So yeah, I think that's like the indie games that have that Souls atmosphere and vibe kind of grasp that as a similar thing that they tackle as well. And the ones that don't and just kind of only go after it for the gameplay feel like that's one of the things where it makes me think that they're like missing the point a little bit, because I just it's so deeply intertwined with that sort of storytelling.
Yeah.
Are you going to say though, Alex? Because I know you tried to say something at the same time as me.
Well, going, very briefly back to the, frustration of not getting a build right, or not having hindsight, or hindsight 2020.
Foresight.
What? Yeah. Um, one of my favorite looking and feeling weapons is the Moonlight butterfly greatsword.
Yeah, the Moonlight
Oh my goodness,
Greatsword.
that's
Yeah.
great.
I don't have enough strength to use it, and it looks like Guts's sword, like just that huge slab of metal, meets the master's sword with, the being able to cast
Yeah.
from it, and that's it's just such a cool weapon, and I have noodle
Yeah.
arms.
It's one of those things where it's a problem, but it's a problem that these kinds of games have just had. If your game has gear in it, it's almost unavoidable, even if you have like a respecking system, because you'll just find a weapon, or you'll like get to an area where you can catch a certain Pokemon that's like just like last area of the game, and it's like, oh well, in Pokemon's case, like, I mean, I guess I'll switch around the like ROM hack to hack this into the beginning, because otherwise I'll just only be able to use it after the very last area of the game, kind of thing.
Hey,
And
you got New Game
it's
plus
unfortunately
7 waiting for you.
exactly that's the other thing, is that, oh well, I couldn't use it now, but the final boss gives me, there's a lot of zeros behind that number of souls. So when I start New Game plus 1, I'm just going to be able to put all the
Especially
remaining
when
levels of
every
strength and
boss
use
has
that now.
multiple boss items that you can get from them that each take
Yeah.
one of their souls. So you got to play the game like 3 times to get every item. I did that for Dark Souls 3, and it was incredibly fun because you get some crazy stuff.
Yeah, it's wacky.
Yeah. Very, very interesting games to play through. Okay, so I also wanted to bring up, now that we're going to move into our lore and story discussion and how these games deliver them, I think one of the only times that we have a positive comparison to Destiny in terms of a game that isn't a shooter is Destiny 2 specifically. I'm not going to say this was good for Destiny 1 because the lore and items was in a phone app and not the game itself. For Destiny 2, at least, items have the same kind of lore that Dark Souls items do. Sometimes a little bit more obtuse because Destiny's a bigger setting with more abstract concepts thrown in. than Dark Souls generally has. But I think it's an interesting comparison that a lot of the like exotics and stuff from Destiny use the same sort of item storytelling that Dark Souls uses to great success, I would say.
Wait, exotics? There's like even they're just giving random legendary weapons now. These really interesting lore bits. Like you. Oh, I can't say any of that. That's all spoilers.
It's all major spoilers.
Well,
I remember from the first game there were a few like hunter cloaks were really good at having a little bit of
Yeah.
lore about like the hunter that died with the cloak, and so you would always get to read a little bit about
Well,
what they were
yeah, that's
doing.
that's one of that's one of the interesting either through Grimoire cards, unfortunately, from D1 or from like word of mouth text that you get from lore entries from weapons and things. One of the they give you an in-lore reason as to why hunters usually have like really crappy looking armor for the most part. It's because they always either and their mentor ends up dying or they have to kill them, and they take an article of clothing or inspire an article of clothing from their mentor, and
Mhm.
they have that as their signature.
That's why even when I eventually get back to Destiny 2 again, Ace of Spades is still going to be my go-to. Not even if it's terrible, because it's Cade's gun.
Yeah,
And I
like
love it.
Cade's cloak, Cade's hunter cape belonged to his
Yeah.
I already forget the what's the word?
Mentor.
Mentor. Yeah. That's the word.
We
It's
got
a very
you,
forgetful
what you mean,
podcast today.
Yeah, I think that's a very common thing, and few games get it right, because I think a lot of games have the issue with they'll start to have that item lore, and then they'll run into problems with consistency, where items will be inconsistent with each other. They'll run into issues where they're also still delivering story via normal mechanisms, and then you're just overloaded with information. Of like, okay, now there's just too much going on.
This is kind of an issue I had with the Pokédex entries in games until I found out that lore-wise, they are literally written by children.
Yes.
Forgot about that.
That's
I
awesome.
was like, this Pokemon has fire breath that's hotter than the surface of the sun.
There's the balloons that are actually dead children, souls.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that kidnap other children.
Mm-hmm.
God.
Gengar's just a whole mess that is too much to get into. My God, what messed up person made Gengar?
Yeah, I think a very similar type of thing. Anything else to add about lore and story delivery, Brett? I know you're waiting patiently in the wings.
Well, I think this is a good time to give our shout out to the man himself, Miyazaki, who is like the creative director and I think just straight up like CEO of From Software now. Which like I don't even remember what his like old days were in the industry. I don't know if he was just like one of those cases where he was just like a programmer that got like lucky and told to do this design thing or something, but all that writing and stuff I'd have to believe comes down to him because he started as like creative director, and all those design decisions like visually and story wise I think it's pretty safe to say you could pin them on him in a similar way that you can pin the wacky stuff in Metal Gear on Kojima. And his writing style is absolutely perfect for this type of game where it leaves so much up to interpretation and so much up to players' discovery that like they just might not figure it out, and that's fine because they'll probably die 50,000 times anyway, and that's what he wants.
So to go into Miyazaki's history a little bit, because I know you mentioned it.
Yeah.
Miyazaki is a very interesting game developer because he started out as a planner, which is usually relatively equivalent to designer in English terms in Japanese game development. Game planner on Armored Core. And then eventually he directed Armored Core 4 and its sequel. After that, Demon Souls was directed by someone else at FromSoft and then was floundering terribly. They all thought it was going to be a huge flop. Miyazaki stepped in on that and offered to basically direct it. So he got real excited at the action fantasy thing and directed that. And then, right until he was assigned, the game was abjectly a failure. Like, broadly considered to be one of the worst games that was going to come out. So
What was wrong with it?
Miyazaki, it wasn't good. Nothing was working to my knowledge, and it wasn't fun. So Miyazaki then went in with the attitude of, no matter what I do, it can't be worse than what is already here. And so what basically happened is he just tried a bunch of stuff that hadn't necessarily been done in fantasy action games before in that, and then people were still super worried it was going to be a terrible failure. So
And then,
even after it released, people thought it might be a terrible failure. I believe the PlayStation president at the time hated the game. It came out and it was a massive success. Like everybody, especially in Western countries, it succeeded incredibly well. Demon's Souls became hugely popular on the PS3. So after that, it's history. Miyazaki's worked on most of the games aside from, I believe, Dark Souls 2. Which he still had a hand in, but wasn't the director, because he was also developing, I think, either Dark Souls 1 or 3 at the same time, or Bloodborne, something like that.
It was Bloodborne, yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, there was a lot of simultaneous development going on. So he's a very interesting director, because he came through the natural progression path of, just being a designer that eventually rose up to director. But man, gets me excited at the concept of a new Armored Core.
I know. We have to mention it we are an Armored Core podcast now. The Halo Infinite episode's done. We're Armored Core now.
Halo's out, Armored Core's in.
You know, until the oh god, what's his name? The guy who did Detroit Become Human Star Wars game comes out.
Oh,
I don't want to be that podcast. But
that'll be a nightmare.
Because this on the thing that I was just talking about with Miyazaki and why his stories are so interesting is that I'm very excited for Elden Rings, because he's doing it in like just a different way now.
Yeah.
Because you have the involvement of George R. R. Martin of Song of Ice and Fire fame, Game of Thrones, which I have not personally read or watched, but I've heard. I mean, the things, good and bad. But I read a little more into how they're going about writing the world building style story of Elden Ring.
Been very interesting.
And it's super interesting. And this is completely spoiler free, because obviously we don't know anything yet, aside from what they've told us.
Spoiler free.
Yeah. It's interesting, because basically what George R. R. Martin did is Miyazaki just asked him to do the things that happened like 1,000 years ago or whatever. Make the gods, make all those like equivalent characters of the past that set up the world that we're in. Do all that like world building stuff, and I will make the game now. I will take your beautiful like above human characters, and I will put 60 arms on them and make them disgusting and have like 6 fingers on each hand and stuff, and just like I will corrupt that world that you've set up. And it's just so interesting to me, because I feel like
it's such a collaborative process that we rarely see.
Yeah.
What if it was a millipede?
Exactly. Yeah. And from East and West too, which I just feel like is super weird. Like that just it doesn't happen as often as I feel like it should.
Well, they finally got like a proper like Western fantasy writer to lay out that foundation. And I think if you're gonna say anything about George R. R. Martin, even if you don't like Song of Ice and Fire, he is an incredible world builder. There's very few authors that are up in that tier of like being able to construct a setting that is believable and interesting while still being fantastical. And Elden Ring is definitely hitting that mark.
Mm-hmm.
After seeing how the story pans out with Elden Ring, I'd love to see. I doubt they'll probably be as good, but I'd love to see more, East-West collaboration in games.
Because I feel like most of the time we've gotten it, it's ended well.
Yeah, exactly.
Rare. But when it does happen, it's been pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think it's very. There's already like a huge VaatiVidya video out that describes like the entire world state of Elden Ring, solely based on pre-release trailers and whatnot. Nothing in the game at all, and I think it's hilarious. That there's so much information you can glean from like interviews and trailers to kind of put together the whole starting point of the world. It's incredibly interesting because it shows that like. I think a lot of people go and they'll play a Souls game. They'll be like, oh, there's not really a story here. There's not really anything more detailed going on. But if you start to read into some of the stuff, like I was playing Bloodborne earlier, and there's a few things that you'll just like read a note somewhere that says something. You're like, wait a minute, what? And
Yeah.
I feel like Elden Ring is very much going to be the same way, where you're gonna find things and just be like, excuse me, is that real? It's
Yeah.
very interesting.
That was one of the two things that I really enjoyed about Dark Souls was the surprise lore when you did get it and how deep in it goes.
Yeah.
That and just the grinding minor enemies for some reason. I didn't enjoy like the bosses as much as I just enjoyed going back grinding for souls with minor enemies and things like that,
Satisfying.
revisiting the undead parish. Is that
Yeah,
that's an
that's the
area in one.
undead
Yeah.
something or other. Might be undead parish. Might be
Parish
something
connected
else.
to the Berg.
Oh yeah, undead
Mm.
Berg. Yeah, I wonder if you're going to eventually end up interested in Elden Ring, Alex, because I do think from what they've said in
I hope so.
interviews,
I really hope I am.
I'll let you know after I get my hands on it if this is a game that feels like it's a good entry point. But they have stated that this is going to be one of the best entry points into Souls-like style games, and that it's aiming to be more approachable and a little bit less like outwardly difficult. So I'm curious to see what that
Yeah,
actually looks like.
I've seen a lot of stuff like that with one of the different I don't know if it's move sets things. I think I was talking to Brett about this. Like there's a sort of a different version of the parry where you can hold the
Yeah.
shield out. You don't have to
Yeah.
time it perfectly. And then there's like a pretty okay accessibility wise window and a good, visual reaction or UI that you can use to hit here, and that's when
Also a crazy move they do in
it's
the latest trailer where a guy throws a fire sword behind him and it like spins, then he slams it down and it makes a big crater. I'm like, oh,
It's super sick.
we're
Yeah.
I
approaching
need
the
to
level
rewatch
of
it.
Magic just being involved in normal weapon move sets, and I'm so excited for that.
Thank God.
It's very, very interesting. All right. Anything else about Lauren's story before we step off of this topic? Brett, you said numb, Brett. Is that a chime in or are you done?
I was about to chime in and then you said great and I was now confused. I think because it's worth pointing out because as much as we can sing the praises of the From Software games, there's still that gap of just sheer quality difference between like 98% of the indie Souls-like games and the
Yeah.
official ones. And a lot of like a huge pitfall that they fall into is just like that type of storytelling. A lot of them try to replicate it, and even in I would say like that this is why another big reason why Hollow Knight is number 2 for the game that we did at the beginning, because it has that kind of storytelling. It has the characters that talk really vaguely about stuff,
Yeah.
and not like item descriptions all the time, because just the way items work in that game is a little different. You don't really get gear. But that same way of just like you can see what happens to like an area just by like looking at it and putting 2 to 2 together kind of thing. But if you do that wrong, which is very easy to do, it's really hard to do this kind of storytelling right. And I'm not even going to pretend that I know how to do it, because I probably will never get the chance to do it, because it's just such a weird thing to do in the first place. But it's so easy to get it wrong, and when you do, then you get the real like black cloud of over your head feeling. This game doesn't have a story. Why am I here? I feel like I'm just like wading
Yeah.
through a pile of like, yeah,
Especially if there's no resolution. That's
yeah,
another
for sure.
huge problem. Is Souls games at least always have a ending, right? Like you
Yeah.
can relink the fire, you can do whatever you need to do to actually hit the end point of that story for yourself.
Mhm.
If you don't give up beforehand like me. But it's another really thing that I don't think we touched on was the personal stories that Dark Souls does. Like with
Yeah.
each of the NPCs that you meet.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about the NPCs
How-
more. That's one of my
Okay.
secondary topics, because I have a big Elden Ring information dump about NPCs happened that I
Oh.
want to talk about a little bit. So we'll
I-
save
I
that
thought it was-
discussion for another few minutes, but we'll get back to them. All right. So after that, Brett gave us a good tangent into the indie Souls scene. And so the question now that I want to ask, we've already talked about why they can fail, what pitfalls there are. What I want to ask right now is, why are they so popular? Why are indie Souls-likes they're like up there with roguelikes in terms of a genre that so many teams are trying to create, and also that do very well because there's a ton of interest in them. People always
I
want to play them.
remembered what I was going to say.
Oh, go for it.
I remember what I was going to say,
Go
and
for
it
it,
fits perfectly. So you mentioned specifically, Ryan, why wouldn't you just brand yourself as the Metroidvania,
Yep.
which would probably reach a wider audience and you'd get a lot less people hating on it? And I think that's because Souls-like games have made a community that's just that kind of community where there's not really too many good examples, and so the community is relatively, compared to like Metroidvanias that have been around
Yeah.
since Metroid and Castlevania, uh, that's just like a super vast community. The Souls-like community is very tightly knit and very like excited about the things that they get to play that align with the very specific things in their niche that they enjoy playing.
It's
And
all like
so
fighting games.
it is, yeah, in that regard for sure. And I think creators just they see that, and it's just like, well, I really like Dark Souls, and I play it all the time. And I think not only could I just do this if I put my own little spin on this, but also I'll get like-minded people very excited about the game if I do even a little bit of a good job in this one aspect of it in a different way than From Software did. And I think that's a big part. That's not even the thing that I wrote down, but that's what I meant to say earlier when I just completely derailed myself like an idiot. That's what I meant to say before, because that's like right after when that was brought up, and I think that's why uh, it's just that this type of game is so popular in the indie scene, like overwhelmingly popular. It's like up there with the 2D platformer right now, and just how many of them there are.
Definitely. Yeah, hard to agree with that. I think that is a big reason, because the Metroidvania thing was almost me probing for that kind of answer, because I do think if I look at Game Pass right now, I think I have 3 separate Metroidvanias from Game Pass installed on my computer. I'm probably not going to play all 3 of them. I might only play one, just because there's so many, and a lot of them are just not great. And I feel like at least with a Souls like that isn't good. Most of them are so bad that you're just not going to play them. With Metroidvanias, a lot of them are like tolerable enough to play, but time consuming enough that you're probably going to miss out on playing another one that was better. So I think it's really interesting where with Souls likes, if you make a good Souls like, your game is almost certainly going to succeed. Even if you make a Souls like that is just approaching the quality of Dark Souls, because like Surge 2 is a game that I think a couple of us in the group have tried and bounced off of. I know Wyatt is not the biggest fan of it.
I'm not either.
I played a bit of it, and I thought it was a good time for about 4 hours. And then just something happened, and I just never really went back to it. So I think it's interesting. But I certainly have heard a lot of people that really like it. So yeah, I wonder how much of it is just that audience is so very loyal to the types of games that they enjoy.
Yeah.
Curious. All right, Alex, I put a category in here specifically for you and I to talk about. Why do people keep trying to turn Skyrim into Dark Souls? And I think if you go and look right now at all the Skyrim combat mods, 95% of them are just trying to turn Skyrim into worse Dark Souls. It's incredibly interesting to look at.
It's I don't know if if the first person who did this, something clicked in their head because they're just like, ooh, similar color palette. What if I and then it's history from there.
It's very curious because they're all very popular, but I feel like I read more complaints about these than actually people enjoying them, which is
there's I don't want to say it's 2 different audiences, but and what I at least likened it with is the combat in Skyrim versus the combat in Dark Souls are satisfying in some ways for Skyrim, in entirely different ways.
Yeah, I agree.
It's Skyrim. It's just spell slinging and sword swinging until someone's health bar reaches 0 first.
To make your number bigger than the enemy's number and smash yourself into them until they go away.
And like the only really feedback you get when you're swinging is, like if you put a shield up, or if someone puts a shield up and blocks your attack. There's like if you swing a sword and it hits someone,
Very
it
little
feels
happens.
like literally nothing. A little V effect of blood spurts out, but it doesn't feel like you hit anything. In
Yeah,
Dark Souls, it always feels like you hit something.
I heavily agree. And I think what this really comes down to with Skyrim is a lot of people very much liking Dark Souls combat and kind of thinking, how can we adjust this to Skyrim? And then running into the issue that Skyrim is a horribly balanced game. Uh,
Yeah.
in the best
Well,
way. I don't necessarily mean that as an insult because it's an RPG, and I
Part
think
of
a
the
lot of the
yeah.
time,
sandbox. Yeah.
part of the
It's
sandbox
that
is being unbalanced.
power fantasy.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of my favorite mods that I was telling you about that I was so happy is included in that mod pack, Dark End,
Yep.
which is this it's just like it's God, the map design is just like a Souls game. It's
Yeah, the author
these
was super
really
inspired by
interesting.
the original Dark Souls, I think, when he made it.
It's these really interesting interconnected paths and pathways and courtyards and areas of the map that link into each other in a really like organic yet labyrinth-like style.
Yeah.
And it's so fun to find your way around that. And it has, I think it definitely, because like I said, the color um, swatches are pretty similar between Dark Souls and Skyrim, what with muted and brown town in most places. Um,
These are
that's an
getting away from that with Elden
oversimplification.
Ring, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Yes.
It definitely treads the line between for easily getting the Souls like aesthetic and ambiance
Yeah.
with it in Dark End. So it's a pretty easy jump overall feel wise, and they also get a lot of along with that atmosphere that really helps with the horror aspects of the mod
Yes.
itself.
And I think Dark End has the benefit of being a separate area that doesn't need to rely on any base game balancing.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
has its own enemies, its own bosses. It's all fully separate, and I think that gives them enough wiggle room to work with within Skyrim's combat system, especially because I believe Dark End was designed with combat mods in mind. So you're supposed to kind of adjust things to fit with it, which
my
makes it work
God.
a little better. So
Ryan, I just figured out why everyone goes to the stealth archer build.
because you can break the game horribly.
Well, no, not just that, but it's like it's because like what I was saying with the sword, there's no it doesn't feel natural because the sword doesn't feel like it's connecting with anything other than a
Yeah.
shield when it hits that. You with a bow that feels natural. You're not
Yeah,
going to
exactly.
feel the arrow impact. That's why it's the most natural
Well,
feeling
it's because
weapon
even with
that
magic
the game
in
has
base
to
Skyrim,
offer.
magic is the same problem of a lot of magic in base Skyrim is very, very poorly balanced towards the later part of the game to where it just kind of stops working and is very unsatisfying. Mods fix that very easily, but I think it is interesting to look at base Skyrim and kind of see these different approaches that it takes compared to a game like Dark Souls. But what I really wanted to get at here is I have played a lot of Skyrim. I played a lot of Skyrim with different mod sets. I made my own mod list, and inevitably, I ended up turning the combat into Dark Souls myself. So now I have to redirect this question at myself and go, why did I do this?
Can't believe you done this.
And
Why did you do this, Ryan?
So what it comes down to is that there just isn't anything else on offer with Skyrim. You really, the way the systems work, you have everything you need to form Dark Souls combat. You have stamina, you have power attacking and everything, you have light and heavy.
Oh.
You have all the elements there. You just need to make them usable in the same way as a Souls game. And so I think that is almost what aligns to make that work to some degree. And I think the issue is often that you need a combination of like 5 different separate combat mods to make it actually functional. And no one mod makes it good. The big thing is like the dodge roll just makes Skyrim better. So everyone's going to put a dodge roll mod in because it just makes the game better.
Vanilla movement is garbage.
It's awful. Melee, if you dual wield in vanilla Skyrim, what are you going to do? You can't do anything. You can't block. All you can do is attack people slightly faster than normal. It's horrible. It's one of the least satisfying things in any game that I've played. So I think actually having the ability to like change that to where I played Got my mod pack set up so that I could specifically play dual wield with a block button, and that's like the best combat in Skyrim I've ever played. Because I could have like the full 3D movement. I could dual wield weapons and like have special custom attacks when I'm dual wielding, so it's not using the same one-handed animations.
Don't you
Really
even have
good.
like a stance switcher?
Oh, I
too?
used to. So I stopped using that because it kind of broke the game to the point where, because Skyrim's enemies are not designed for that amount of player option in mind, nothing in the game could remotely come close to challenging me unless you gave it a huge amount of HP. Just because, like, if you add the ability to block time-wise and like have a timed reactive block that blocks all the damage you take, you now have an instant way to deal with every enemy in Skyrim. Because nothing can get around it. Because the game never accounted for you being able to do that. So, yeah, I just think it's an interesting addendum to add here because it's so obvious looking at basically any Elder Scrolls game mod list, even back to Oblivion, that the same solutions are kind of being presented of turning them more like a first-person Dark Souls. And sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, but it's very interesting. Because I think that it's very rare to see, like, I did play a mod set once that tried to turn it more into like a Devil May Cry style system, and then it just had the same problem of enemies can do nothing at that point. You've made your character so overpowered just through the presence of like combat air combos and whatnot that you now have no ability to actually, the enemies have no ability to do anything because the player is just so overpowered just through options that they have. So yeah, I think it's just an interesting Skyrim addendum there. All right. So, Brett, do you want to do your giant paragraph before or after the specific Elden Ring topic points?
Well, I have a thing before the giant paragraph.
Okay.
That is very short because you already conveniently did the first half of it. Because we were talking about the up and comer Miyazaki and how that related to Demon Souls and him fixing that. Well, the wonderful thing about people trying to turn Elder Scrolls into Dark Souls is that that's been it from the start, baby, because Demon Souls was a project that Sony approached from Software and was like, "Hey, you guys make those Kingfield games that's like the first person, like just Western RPG dungeon crawler, just we make that over here." Over there in America, they got Skyrim coming out. That makes them a lot of money. We want you to make us
amount of money.
a lot of money. And so they were like, make something that will do the same for us that it did for the Elder Scrolls. Make us an Elder Scrolls copy. And then whoever was there working on Demon Souls first was trying to make a new
Really messed
Kingsfield
up.
game. Really messed up. Trying to do, and Miyazaki came in and was like, well, and then it's the same thing. It's a cycle, much like the Age of Fire. It's a cycle. It keeps happening.
Oh my god.
Dark Souls becomes Skyrim, becomes Dark Souls, becomes Skyrim. It never stops. But yeah, I always find that funny that that's where such a unique series started, as literally just trying to be a copy of something.
Yeah.
Which will transition to me into my big paragraph, which won't actually be that big of a paragraph, I promise. The uniqueness of the actual FromSoft Souls franchise is, at least for me, always the biggest draw for it, and I felt like a need to just point it out because I don't know. For me, I'm more of a sci-fi person because the things that come out of sci-fi are more interesting to me, and that they just like bend physics or time or technology or something like that we just don't have around today, and it's like super unique most of the time. I mean, not even most of the time. Most of the time, we just get like the same thing over and over again. But there are more cool examples that interest me specifically than there are with fantasy things. Like I think fantasy, and I just think like, Lord of the Rings, magic object, dragon, magic sword, that kind of thing. It's overdone. Like it's even more overdone than zombies, dare I say. But the Souls games are not like that. And I think they're not like that because From Software and a lot of Japanese developers in general just have this attitude towards taking things from literally everywhere and not caring and putting it into their game that's supposed to be like medieval fantasy. You have the weird, wacky, not samurai armors. You have the dragons from all different
You can
cultures.
literally start playing Elden Ring as a samurai. It's one of the starting classes.
Oh.
It's fantastic. There's so many like just parts of like historical weapons from like here, and here, historical real life philosophies from here, and here, and all these like different beliefs and forms of art and stuff that all come together into making one unique thing. And at least for me, that ends up making a lot more interesting of a product than, regular Western fantasy game number 5 million. And Elden Ring,
Yeah.
at least from what I've played and seen so far, is like that times a billion. And I just hope that attitude never dies with them, because that is like the biggest draw of their games for me, and I know for a lot of other people too, because you just
Absolutely.
won't find that combo of things anywhere else. It's just everyone else is just too like almost afraid to do it, because
I
the
need to be able
alternative
to
is
use
just so safe.
crazy gravity magic and a katana in the same game.
Yeah.
Sorry, wait. There's crazy gravity magic in Elden Ring.
Yeah, that's what the earthbending looking
Yes.
moves are. It's
Oh
it's like gravity star magic, and I'm like, this sounds so
Oh,
cool.
It's so
God.
sick.
This is already
sounds
like a
so
whole
cool.
breakdown of those like different schools of sorcery that all kind of hate each other in Elden Ring because they all believe they're the
Ooh.
one true sorcery. It's great.
Oh, I already love the lore. Holy crap.
Yeah, it's incredibly interesting. So now it's time for us to get into the full Elden Ring hype train section of this podcast.
Oh boy.
We're gonna close out with this, and basically, I want to just run through some of the things that Elden Ring is gonna have and get thoughts on it. The first of all being, this is the first Souls-like game to have a full open world in terms of like being open areas primarily.
Yeah.
Because you can kind of make the argument that every Souls game is open world in some way, because they all have a very open world DNA, even though they don't have like open world activities and stuff like that. They are still technically open world for the most part. But Elden Ring is the first game to go all in on this and have a world designed for this kind of openness and freedom of exploration. Good
Little
thoughts.
did I know that from birth I craved a horse that could jump over a 3-story building.
Yes.
Not only with one jump, but two.
Two.
A horse
Two
that can double jump.
Absolutely.
You have Yoshi with hooves in a Souls game.
Incredible.
Yeah, it's one of those things where for me, I mean, because you know me, I hear that it's going to be an open world game, and I go, please let it not be true, please let it not be true, please let it not be true. But they did the right thing, which means they did the Tsushima thing, which is it made a couple really big areas and then attached them together. And no specific things, because I know people are very antsy with spoilers. But from what I played in the network test, it was just so full of things to do. There weren't any like half-assed battle pass shoe-ins, Halo Infinite, where it's just like level up the thing by doing the same thing over and over again this many times. It's like you find a cool like ruin on the horizon on a hill, go there, and you will find something that is like so like weird that you're not even sure if it belongs in the setting of the game. And then you kill it, and then you get a cool thing, and you go, wow, that was worth it. I'm happy.
Is that the thing you're talking about where like you were trying to climb up a mountain and stumbled upon a cave or something like that? Or it was a completely alternate way to get into this one dungeon or something?
Yeah, there's a bunch of them.
That's something different. Yeah.
Ah.
There's a bunch of things
But
like that look very fun.
Yeah, just that kind of, because it's one of those things where it's the buzzwords where people say it and it's like, oh, and it doesn't mean anything half the time. It's the thing where people go, oh, do you see that? Well, you can go there. It's like the one time playing a game where I've been like, oh, I hope I could go there. Wait a second, I'm playing Elden Ring. I can, and then I go there, and then it's something worth it.
There's still a couple of shots on like the first reveal of gameplay of Elden Ring. There's a couple of shots of like a few pillar islands floating off the, or not floating, but like
floating?
Just built up. They're built into the sea, so they're not like actually floating, but they are like tiny pillars built out of the sea that rise up with like chain
Oh.
bridges between them, and they show it
Oh,
like a
yes.
sweeping shot, and I'm like, I want to go see that so
It's
badly.
awesome.
Because that area can't be like a main area because it's not big enough to be like a full dungeon. But I want to know what's at the end of that. Just so much.
Surprise at the cool.
Because the environment itself just is so, I think, breathtaking here, to where it's very much like Breath of the Wild, where you have this like landscape that is just inviting to go explore in a way that I think often doesn't happen in normal Souls games because they're so focused on like dungeon dynamics where it never really feels like you're exploring a world. You're more just making your way through different paths. So I think it's a very interesting note.
I hope it will have more to offer than Breath of the Wild's open world.
God, I hope.
As much as I like Breath of the Wild, yeah, it doesn't have a lot of open world activities. Not even to mention not Breath of the Wild, Elden Ring's map, like the actual art of the map. Is some
it's
of the
beautiful.
Most beautiful map art that I have seen in a game. I love it. I'm a huge fan of like the drawn map style. It's a part of the reason that I love Oblivion and its map so much. It has just like the hand drawn cartography style map that I think looks so good. And Elden Ring just has the even more interesting like different painted parts of it. I think are so cool. Very much brings me back to like classic pirate story maps that have different like colored sections and like the monster in the ocean. I love to see that sort of thing.
It's like the where Kingdom Come had the very realistic style of map. This one has a much more fantasy cartographer feel to it, and it's
rare to see.
So satisfying.
It does mean that you have to like redo the entire map based on the artwork.
I would like a poster of this.
Please.
Yeah, legitimately. Absolutely. It's that nice looking.
It's like a giant crater in one section that looks super cool. So many things that are just like, I want to go see these. All right. So, fitting in with the open world, Miyazaki himself has confirmed that one major returning feature of Elden Ring is poison swamps.
No!
Let's go, baby!
And specifically, multiple poison swamps.
I don't want to get trench foot again. No!
Well, this time you can get scarlet rot. Another interesting thing that is
whatever that means.
See, the poison swamps, I feel like playing the poison swamp in Dark Souls 1 is a very different experience to playing the poison swamp in Dark Souls 3.
Yes.
With
good
fun
reason.
In 3? 3's is a lot better.
Okay.
Still kind of annoying, but it is a lot more manageable, and you kind of know what you're getting into when you get there. And if you know what you're doing, you can get through that entire area without ever having to deal with it.
Is that solely because you've experienced one before? Or
no, it's because the area is designed a lot better. There's like an actual pathway around it, and you generally know where you need to go because you can look towards the sky and see like different things that you need to go to.
And the poison is more forgiving too.
The poison doesn't kill you nearly as quickly.
No, not enough people think of looking up for
because they tell you at the start there's
direction
like
in games.
Flaming beacons you have to go to. Is a cool note. And there's another area that's like it's like a side area with a weird dragon baby boss that has like its own poison swamp that's a little bit more dangerous, but it's that one is more okay because it's a side area that you have to kind of opt into doing. It's not something you need to do to get through the story, so it's an interesting way of handling it. I just hope we don't have a poison dungeon. It's my only thing. Don't give us a whole poison dungeon, please.
There's gonna be one, Ryan. You don't know how big it is. There's gonna be one.
If anything, I can concede enough to the point where I'll accept it being one of the smaller ones, because we have two different levels of dungeon. Don't forget, we have like the mini dungeon there's just like spread around the world all over the place, and then there's the big legacy dungeons, which are
like
the big,
four
just like straight up Dark
giant
Souls.
lord castles.
Yeah. If one of those is just all the poison swamp, I'm
gonna be furious.
I'll play it. I'm gonna say I'll be mad now, but I'll play it. I'll just be mad while playing it. If it's the small ones, it'll be fine, I'm sure.
Do you think that we'll be able to familiarize ourselves with interesting or like sort of gimmick mechanics that will be reused in the giant castles, or do you think the castle dungeons will have completely unique mechanics that we just won't
I
see
wonder.
anything like.
Like Zelda, you
Yeah,
mean?
that's
Yeah.
what I've
Like
been
you get
thinking
the
too.
item and you use it.
Sort of, yeah.
I could see it.
I could see there being like some Zelda style unique mechanics to each dungeon. Especially with like enemies that have a specific type of pattern. Like maybe one will have AoE enemies, maybe one will have like mostly human enemies. So I'm curious to see how that ends up working out. I did want to talk a little bit about NPCs because this isn't something they've specifically said. However, looking at a couple of the trailers that have released, we have seen a lot of NPCs in this game.
Yeah.
And a lot that are like friendly NPCs, which I think is really, really interesting because most Souls games have a very small cast of characters. Elden Ring looks to have like at least double that from what we've seen so far.
Yeah.
And they also said in the latest overview trailer, one of the side things they mentioned offhand is that you'll have a lot of different stories with these NPCs to pursue. So I'm wondering if it's going to be like a lot of more detailed character side quests than we've had before. Especially because usually we'll get like one with Siegfried or the Onion Knight, but we usually don't get like one for every character. So I'm curious to see how detailed this gets.
Pringles man.
Yeah.
I would like it if they went as just as wild as they can because they have a whole big like world to span with these now. And
I
at
want to go
least again from what I've played in the network test, I can't really remember. There's a couple instances of you fighting alongside an NPC character and like helping them, but there was just one cool thing that happened where an NPC helped you fight something, and it was just super sick. And I want that to happen more because one person combat in Elden Ring is just amazing with the amount of things you can do, and
Yeah.
even whether it's a real person or not, just like multiple people fighting stuff just is cool.
like with the giant helping you take down the dragon in
Yeah.
Dark Souls.
Well, not even just like a cutscene thing. I mean, like NPC invades you and other NPC comes to help,
Yeah.
and he uses like a crazy katana skill or
I-
something that wipes blood everywhere.
I would like to go through the same amount of drama as a telenovela with Hot Giant Man.
Yeah, I hope they do
Absolutely.
silly things with him.
We need like a 3-part character arc with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just I'm so excited to see what this ends up looking like. And I do want to bring up a few other things we've learned is that they're aiming to have a lot more viable stealth-oriented builds and things like ranged-oriented builds. So I'm very curious to see like how many things we're going to end up taking from Sekiro in this game.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to have like a death blow type system for some enemies and whatnot?
I don't think it's gonna.
See.
I don't think we're gonna have like poise or a grappling hook, unfortunately. And
We have poise, but it's Dark Souls poise. It's not Sekiro poise.
Yes.
to my
Yeah.
knowledge.
yeah,
It's in between both of them.
More understandable than Dark Souls poise, hopefully.
It is because I'm trying to remember exactly what this. There was a YouTuber that broke it down in a very interesting way that made me very excited for the game. Because the way that poise works is that there is the invisible Sekiro stagger meter. It's just it was visible in Sekiro. It's invisible now. And you have your regular like light attacks that do light damage, and they also do barely any stagger damage. You can still stagger like your regular like add enemy with like your light blows like you always used to, but and the reason I got absolutely obliterated by so many of the larger enemies and bosses I fought is because in all the other games, your heavy attacks and your weapon skills and stuff are just like, oh, that looks cool. I'll use that to like do some AoE, I guess, like if there's like 3 guys on me or something. In Elden Ring, the way that you break the invisible stagger bar faster is you have to do the cool stuff. You have to do the parries, you have to do the block parries, you have to do jumping attacks, you have to do heavy attacks, weapon skills,
arts.
all the cool things that look cool are actually viable for the game now. So like
Super
doing the crazy
important.
thing. Yes, doing the thing where you like stagger the boss and it's like a big dragon and their head bows down so you can do the visceral attack on them. You get it there by doing the stagger damage with the big heavy attacks. So there's the fusion where that lies, which is I just think awesome.
that was another, I guess, one of the things that turned me off of Dark Souls. Why I like fighting the smaller enemies so much more, or the enemies that are me-sized or slightly bigger, is like I can still stagger. I don't feel like I can stagger bosses that are a heaping mass of
It's
organic
yeah.
matter
You just
or
have to
things like
block or
that.
dodge, and that's it.
Yeah, I want to be able to do the cool stuff.
Well, now you can,
All right.
and still die.
Yeah, and I think that's the important note there. It's been mentioned a bunch before, but here the weapon skills are not restricted to specific weapons for the most part. They're restricted to like weapon classes, but not
Yeah.
one type of weapon. So if you have like a cool weapon skill from something you want to use on other weapons, you can. It's very exciting. It's a thing that I really thought needed to be adjusted in Dark Souls 3.
Yeah.
This is like a really cool scimitar that has a dinky little backflip as its weapon art. It's so useless. Because
But it's cool.
It's really cool, but then I don't get to do the cool attacks. And I want the cool attacks. I want my freed scythe where I can like flip around and summon a second scythe. It's just so
What?
there's such a difference between the level of cool stuff you can do. And speaking of the backflip, I think that's another interesting one because I remember seeing a breakdown of this scimitar backflip when the network test was live because it's a notable thing for PvP. It was like a huge thing in PvP where you could do the backflip as another option to get away from people. And here, instead of being a weapon art, it was tied to a stick movement and the button press, which to me implies that we might see some more weapons that have a little bit more varied movesets, more akin to Bloodborne than Dark Souls. It was like you press back on the left stick while attacking and you'll do a backflip or something. Very cool.
Do you think we'll get transforming weapons?
We already do.
Oh,
you mentioned it. You mentioned it in your notes. The snake shield that turns into a whip that you can sling out in front of you. But yeah, that is just like that's an example of the FromSoft depth. Like what do you mean in this just single player ARPG with big world is that I can do slightly different stick movements and it will contextually change the direction of the backflip and like you could do like attack delays and animation cancels with it and stuff.
That's what
and it's all built in.
Been doing for 20 years.
it's like
for some
and now
reason,
it's in a Souls game.
Games don't do it. The fighting games have been doing forever. It's just the kind of thing more games need.
I love contextual things or like specific environmental takedowns or things like that in games.
Yeah.
Oh.
So fun. All right. So with that, we've reached the end of the show. We've gone through our list of things, unless there's something else that people want to talk about. Inevitably, we're gonna end up talking about Elden Ring again very soon.
Yes.
I think Brett and I are gonna be spending a lot of time with this game, probably the day it comes out. So we'll have things to say. Whether or not we do a games club on this is probably going to depend heavily on how in-depth the game is. Because if it's super in-depth, I can imagine we might want to do more than one playthrough and try some different things out before we do it. So we'll leave that up in the air for
now. Will you guys be... Oh, wait. It's on PC, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Would you guys be down to streaming so I could watch some?
Yeah, I'll stream some.
Yeah. I mean... Yeah, OBS is a thing.
Be on this Discord the entire day that it's out, just in the channel playing it. So yeah, that's gonna be our plan for Elden Ring for now. With that, it's time for shoutouts, and I'm gonna send my shoutout to a very look. They released an Instagram post, the Bandai Namco did, of the different Elden Ring starting classes, and one of these classes is so extra that I love it. It's called the Confessor. And the Confessor is a church assassin with a sword that also uses magic, and they are straight up the like classic vampire movie church assassin. I love that so much, and I think I found my starting class.
So no, I still want to be that guy with the cool helmet hair.
Oh, there's a ton of them.
So he's cool too.
There's like 3 of them. They all look good. Yeah, that class to me just looks it's so exciting. I just love the visual theme of it.
Yeah. I also just like the strength faith build is just I do that like every time. I play at least once. My shout out. I talked about this before the stream that I have spent a stupid amount of time in the final dungeon of Digital Devil Saga 2. But as much as I have caused pain to myself with the difficulty of the game and how sometimes it just doesn't want you to win. My God, Nocturne got a re-release on modern systems, and I really hope that they just do that for the other PS2 SMT games because like nobody has played this duology, and it's so sick and it's so unique, and it does a lot of things that are
a DS sequel, didn't it?
That's Soul Hackers. It's different digital things.
It also has a mobile
blame
game. It also has a mobile game.
And they also have, speaking of Soul Hackers, they also have perhaps a new one coming out because there are teasers surfacing.
I did hear this rumor.
Yeah, new visual material that features a prompt for an R1 button.
I mean,
So,
they did just
game.
remaster all the Shin Megami Tensei demons for SMT5, so makes sense.
Yep, would be nice to see.
All right, what you got for us, Alex?
I had something. I really did, and I've completely forgotten it. Oh
Not again.
no, it's happening.
Oh God.
Oh, was it around me somewhere? I
can't.
God,
We'll never know.
I was buying it as a bit for like 10 seconds.
It's not a bit.
Not a bit.
It's not a bit.
You got to get a remember all, Alex.
Problem is, I can't remember what I've forgotten.
Oh.
My shout out instead will be, please don't turn off the stream. When you do, I cease to exist.
It's true. We only see
note.
Alex when we stream, and that's it.
There's the outro. As always, Tuesday morning, 7 a.m. Eastern time on podcast platform of your choice. That's it. That's the entire thing.
Good. Bye, Alex. We'll see you next week. But have fun in purgatory.